So HTML and CSS, these are the website basics. Some of y'all might have experience with this. If so, just kind of bear with me because not everybody does. So starting with HTML, this is kind of the website's skeleton. It's what holds all the content. Um, so HTML actually is an acronym. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And that's what holds the content and structure of every website you see. HTML5 is the current standard, and there's a lot of accessibility features, which is really good for people with screen readers. And overall, it's just a really good markup language. And you've definitely seen it before. If you've ever gone on a website, that's HTML you're seeing. And here's a little example. So for the site you'll be making, if you hit inspect element, this is HTML you're seeing right there, and you could modify it and it'd change on your end. But yeah, that's basically HTML in a super big overview. So the syntax of HTML, it's made up of things called tags. So that basically tells the browser what kind of content's being displayed, and within the tags is the actual content. As you can see here, they're repeating tags, an opening and a closing one, and then the content sits in the middle. So with those tags, you can put attributes inside of them. So with this example, we're saying the class of this tag is message, and that means the hello world content has a class of message. These take the form of attribute equals value, and right now it's not really apparent like why this is super cool, but once we hop into the CSS portion, it definitely has its uses. So HTML, it's structured kind of like this. You have an opening HTML tag, a body, and then you put a ton of stuff inside of here, and then you close it back out. Inside of here, that's really the meat of like what web pages look like, and we'll get a little more into that. As you kind of saw in that the previous example, like tags, they go inside each other. This is nesting. So tags have children and parents. It's kind of a happy family. But this does create a document object model. And that's really important for JavaScript. We're not going to cover it right now, but you can really see nesting in like this simple example. So header, it has a header tag, a nav bar, and links inside of it. So that's essentially what nested tags look like. Some example tags, there are a ton. These are really the important ones that you'll come across quite often. I'm not going to go over them too much because you kind of just find them when you need them. The internet's a great place to search for all that, but they do have different meanings. So like a paragraph tag holds text usually. Heading tags, it makes the text big. So in this site, like this is a heading tag, this is a paragraph. Ordered and unordered lists have list elements. You can also see that here, like this is an unordered list, this is an ordered list. And they just kind of keep going on and on. They all have different meanings. That's called semantic HTML. It tells the browser what the content actually is meaning. So those are kind of content tags. We also have layout tags, and these include things like basically the structure of the web page. So like a header, footer, the main content, a nav bar, sections, and just things that basically describe to the browser like, hey, this is what this content means. And that's really where the accessibility features come in. Screen readers, they might look at this and be like, okay, this is the header that has a nav bar. I need to read that for somebody. Yeah, and then within those, you'll put the actual content tags. So I know that was extremely quick, but just like think of them as Legos, and if you piece them all together, you'll kind of get something like this. So this is just a ton of HTML here, and when the browser gets it, it actually converts it into, it's not really beautiful, but an actual web page. So like this is just raw HTML, no CSS. Yeah, I mean, it's not too impressive, but it's like, I guess you're a web developer if you can pop something like this out. So that's HTML. Again, it's super, that was super fast. But I'll provide resources for when you're actually working on it. Right now, I'm just trying to get like a high level overview of these things just so you're a little familiar with them as you go on. Okay, so CSS is where we make the transition from like this to this. Personally, I like this kind of site a little more. That's just me. I think some of y'all would agree, but CSS is what makes that change. So once again, it's an acronym for Cascading Style Sheet, and it adds the styling to your pages. And it lets you move things around so it's not all just left aligned, black and white, really plain. Super powerful. And CSS is made up of selectors. So these are a lot of definitions. It's not super important to know them right now, but selectors basically target HTML elements, and there are different types of selectors, and those selectors apply rules to the HTML elements. That's a super abstract view. We'll dig in a little deeper. So applying styles, the selectors, you can see them here. So this would be a tag selector that selects H1 tags. The gibberish would select a class called gibberish, and blah blah is anything with the ID blah blah. And these kind of go from general to specific. So general tags, they would apply to anything with the H1 tag or whatever you put. If it's an image, a link, it applies to all of those. Classes are a little more specific, but multiple elements can have the same class. So like if I wanted all the divs with gibberish to have a margin, I would do something like this. And then IDs, they're unique to each element. So if you want just one thing to look a certain way, you would use an ID for something like that. And you can also link these styles together. And this makes these tags even more precise. So if you want like gibberish to have the margin from the previous slide, but you want this one to look green, you'd kind of link them together like this, just to make it really specific. And it just really lets you get precise with the CSS you're applying. Some basic properties, there are probably 200 or 300 of these. I don't think you'll use most of them, but you can search online. But there's things for color, like background color or font color. You can change what type of font and how big it is with font size and font family. You can move things around with display and position, and you can kind of separate things and move them around again with spacing such as margin and padding. To get a little more specific on spacing stuff, you have padding and margins. So these basically function the same way, but fundamentally they kind of do different things. So as y'all can see on this picture, you have all the content of the HTML element in this content box. And then padding would kind of push the size of the actual box a little, while margin would be pushing things away from that box on the outside. That's kind of a specific example of like a difference between tags, but there are a lot of nuances to all of these things. And just kind of going over like more of what CSS can do. Um, there are media queries as well, which can take a website from looking good on desktop to also looking good on mobile, just through changing CSS. Um, this is something with the project you'll experiment with a bit more, but right now I'm just trying to showcase like the highlights of CSS. There's also Flexbox for positioning. I'm a huge fan of Flexbox. There's this fun site called Flexbox Froggy that you just try and get the frogs on the lily pads using Flex. Um, but yeah, it's basically just for layouts in CSS and making things move a certain way. Um, and you'll get practice with it while working on your grocery project. So all of that, again, really quick, just a high-level overview. What can it do? It can take that boring HTML and then kind of sit on top of it and then produce a beautiful site. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's definitely a step up. So that's kind of the power of CSS. So, you know, Cal Poly is a big learn by doing school. So we're actually gonna, once y'all get in your hands dirty, by producing a project pretty similar to this. It doesn't have to be the grocery one, but the grocery one's pretty cool. So between now and next Tuesday, so you have a week for all this, you're gonna basically start by building a site similar to this, just getting content on the page, using the correct tags, and building pages like, you know, the home, about the chef, like just like any good recipe site would. And then you'll also add CSS to take it from that like boring black and white to a super colorful thing. And I know all this was super fast. I'll send out more detailed specifications in Slack, some resources to actually help you like take an element and figure out how you can apply it in the project, and just more general guidelines. And you might know all of this right now, but if you don't, that's completely fine. Like, I don't expect y'all to. There are a lot of good resources online though. Like Mozilla Developer Network, their documentation's super great for all web dev stuff. There's Stack Overflow, all of y'all are probably familiar with that. W3 Schools, like I'm not a fan of it, but it kind of works. And then if none of those sites are giving you what you need, you can always like ask on Discord or Slack, pop into director office hours, Saturdays 10 to noon, or just slide into my DMs. Like, I'm really happy to be working with y'all. And I don't know, like I'd love to help if I can. But that was a super, super fast overview of HTML and CSS. Again, I'll throw out resources and more project specifications. But yeah, I think that's enough of that. So thank y'all for listening. You made it through day one of boot camp. Good job.